Welcome back. It is now time for the Legal Beat with Neuberger and Partners LLP. Plain talk about legal, liberty, and social justice issues that impact all Canadians. What we need to know and want to talk about, or specifically, what Joseph Neuberger wants to talk about.
Now you're making me seem like a control.
Well, no, but it's your segment, so we need to talk about this. But I mean, the criminal code, is what we're gonna hit on today.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, so tell the whole criminal code. No, but this is about basically, I guess it's about the tough on crime agenda. And
it is. There's this recent case from the Supreme Court of Canada which has gone relatively unnoticed, which dealt with bail.
Right.
So, what people should generally know is that if you're charged with an offense, you're presumed innocent, and you have a constitutional right to bail. The problem is it's getting a little tougher as we go along with the tough on crime policy, and I'm a person who believes very heavily in civil liberties and the assurance that people should be able to get bail, a reasonable bail, and be able to defend themselves. But a recent case took a look at a ground for where people get detained. That means they're kept in jail, which we call in the business as the tertiary ground, but really it's a ground that deals with maintenance of the confidence in the administration of justice, which doesn't mean a whole lot, but it's like if we were to let this person out and presumably they've done something really bad, it does not reflect well on the justice system. That's essentially the idea, and there's a number of factors in there. But what's interesting is Supreme Court of Canada has expanded, really, that ground. That it's not just for rare cases or special cases or heinous cases, and it can be used on its own, irregardless of the other grounds that can be used to detain somebody. And they've listed out a number of factors which are important, and I'm not going to go into all of them because many of them are not really of great interest to maybe the listening audience. But they talk about one sort of factor where you look at the circumstances of the offense, and it could be a hate crime, it could be a crime of violence, could be a crime within a domestic context or a terrorist context. And what's interesting about this is, given how public opinion moves, and if sometimes our government, or because of the immediacy of information in our media through social media, you can create a moral panic pretty easily about a particular crime. And then it can translate down to the bail hearings and to the positions that Crown attorneys take, and we can find more people held in custody, which can result in guilty pleas where people are actually not guilty. And I think it can have a deleterious effect on people who are particularly suffering from mental illness. And when we talk about cases in domestic context, I've represented a number of women and men over the years who are charged arising out of high conflict divorce cases. And there is a hard push to keep people in custody, and that can severely hamper their rights in the family courts as well as in defending themselves in the criminal case.
But hold on a second. Okay, let's take divorce, because we've also heard that there are a lot of accusations made that aren't necessarily
true.
Yeah, that would be the word I'm going.
Yeah,
it's mudslinging. They want to make sure they've got custody. They want to keep
That's right.
the house, so they throw some mud, and it sticks. So
it sticks very badly, and it's both ways. So we've had many cases over 20 years. We do a lot of this domestic related work, and we've represented both male and female accused individuals. And it's a strategy which is used in the family court, and it's in the proceedings, and then when something happens which is adverse that one party doesn't like, then they make even more accusations and go to the police. And it sticks, and it causes long-term problems, economic hardship. More importantly, it impacts children, and it can be very damaging. So if you combine that then with restrictive bail, in other words, that we are trying to protect the public because these crimes are particularly heinous or serious, then it may have an even more severe impact on our public.
So, but who ultimately makes the decision in this case? It's the judge.
Well, at first instance, you have somebody called the Justice of the Peace. Now, some of
Right.
these individuals are trained lawyers, some are not. And they try very hard, generally, to try and balance everything, but courts are moving fast. You've got lots of people to deal with.
Courts are moving fast? That's new.
Well, if you spend the time down there, you'd see that in
Yeah.
some courts it's not that busy, and there's a lot that is being meted out fairly quickly. But a bail court, especially after a long weekend, can be extremely busy, and they're trying to move the people through the inventory, if you can put it that way, through the system pretty quick. So, and if you have Crown attorneys who are taking hard positions because of a particular trend or a public opinion, which they often can be subjected to, then, we may wind up with people being detained by justice of peace, and then you have to appeal your bail. It's called a bail review, and you go to the Superior Court, and a case like this went all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada. But by that time, somebody's in jail, and financially they could be completely devastated.
But that, to me, makes it sound like you're guilty until you're proven guilty.
That's exactly the civil liberty issue, and that's what we got to talk about, because it is very easy to detain somebody, and then your presumption of innocence is essentially thrown out the window. And that's what the problem is, and we need to be more protectful of our own civil liberties. And over the last 5 to 10 years, I think we've seen a greater erosion of our right to privacy and other aspects of our civil liberties. I mean, our cell phones are open to inspection now by police if we're suspected of an offense. Bail is going to be up for grabs now a little bit more. It's much harder sometimes in the criminal courts to get a fair trial. I mean, we are looking at a general erosion of our civil liberties, and that's something I think we all should take very seriously.
But do you think it's a case of, like, most people in the general public, I'm making, rash generalization here, would say, well, this isn't going to affect me because...
I love that. I love that. My clients come in, I have a client who comes in, and they're, they could be a plumber, an electrician, a dentist, a dental hygienist, like whatever, and they go, how can this happen to me? How can this happen to me? Because probably 90% of my clientele are people who are just good, hardworking individuals who have been charged for the first time, and their whole life has been turned upside down. And many people end up, and unfortunately, I try and be sensitive to them, and I try and explain the system to them. But then I also say, you have to listen a little bit to who we're electing in government and what the policies they're promoting, especially in the criminal context, because they'll talk about tough on crime, restricting bail, longer sentences. We got to do all this while the crime rates are still going down. And it affects those people who've never been charged before. We're not talking about the habitual criminal who's going out with a gun to commit a robbery or doing something of that nature. We're talking about people like you and me who could very easily be arrested on somebody's statement without other demonstrative evidence to assist, and then their whole life is upside down. And it does happen. And I hear that all the time, like, oh my God, how can this happen to me? And that's why we have to be so careful about this, because if we go too far in one direction, because we are fearing the risk that is out there, which I think is just fake. I think it's just one of those things.
This is all stemming from 9/11? Is this all what we call the new normal? All these changes of terror and privacy?
Well, 9/11 was really a monumental shift, right? I mean, that was an incredibly dangerous thing. And so we've seen, the various acts in the United States and Canada dealing with terrorism. And so I don't think that's unfounded, but then there was a lot of pushback from civil liberties about how much of our liberty do we want to give up for the sake of protection. And, fortunately we've seen in the decades since that I think the erosion of civil liberties has not been that bad, and we are generally safer. However, it's flowed into other areas. And, there's always the fear about surreptitious interceptive communications and other things. And so it is generally, a campaign of fear that's put on by government that justifies these measures, and the public feeds into it because they want their children to be safer. They want to feel safer. But, you walk around Toronto or many cities across Ontario or Canada, and we have lovely communities where you're really not at risk. And the rates of crime are consistently going down. So these are factors that we should pay attention to, especially when our government is up for election and they want to talk to us and have a dialogue about these policies, and we've got to get more engaged.
One of the things I find most frightening goes back to something you said earlier on in our conversation, is the status of things right now leading to many people taking a guilty plea when they are not indeed guilty.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a scary thing.
It is. We've heard in the past, and there have been many cases where, the Innocence Project or AIDWIC, which, for the wrongfully accused, cases have come forward and people have said, well, I pled guilty because I was in jail for a year and I just needed to get out, so I cut some deal. And that's a reality. And put that with people who suffer from mental health issues. And the fact that our, as I call it, the civil system, the non-criminal system with respect to mental health has been eroded because of lack of proper financing. I understand that there's real pulls on budgets in all sorts of directions, but we see people who have mental illness that are not getting the care and the resources that they need through the civil system, and sadly, if they commit a criminal offense, and it can be a serious offense, we can see somebody caught within a system and left there for a long time, forced to do a guilty plea, or forced into other situations which are not in their best interests. So there are dangers.
Okay, so say Sharon gets arrested.
And she
Again?
calls
No.
me.
And she
And
calls.
because I'm here,
Well,
I'll
that-
give a discount.
Okay, this is
See?
good. Well, see, now this is my point. When she's making that one call,
Yeah.
should she be making sure she's calling a lawyer who has specific experience in bail?
There's no such thing as specific experience
Okay.
in bail. So, there's lots of very good lawyers across the city. So most good lawyers understand the law and know how to run a bail hearing. What's important is that when you go for a bail hearing, you actually plan it out. So if you need to have somebody as a surety, you want to check that person out, have them prepared, make sure you've got all your ducks in a row so that when you're running your hearing, it's done. And we have a lot of the bail hearings are done by duty counsel. So these are lawyers who are provided through the free legal aid system, and many of them are very good at their job. But I hear often a lot are saying, well, I'm just agreeing to anything just to get out, which is not a good answer, because then weeks later they're saying to me, I can't work, I can't see my child, I can't
leave
do
the
this,
house,
I can't go to the washroom without my surety being with me. I know I'm a bit extreme, but and these things are very hard to undo. So it's very important at the beginning stages of a case to start building your defense and be prepared for what you have to do for bail, because it's not just short-term gain. You've got to look at the long-term. There's many other factors at play. So they should be calling somebody who is experienced and capable to run a bail hearing and to look at the future. What are the next steps that are necessary to help this person?
And as from a societal level or political level, you think people need to pay more attention to what political parties are proposing?
We do. We need to look at a number of issues. It is, as we discussed a week ago, about what it is to keep offenders in jail for a longer period of time and how that impacts us financially, it impacts us from a risk standpoint. We got to look at the social justice issues that are out there. Are there other ways to deal with these issues? We look at, when we're talking about the abuses that go on in the family system, which are from both sides, are there some reforms needed in order to make that a more expeditious and less expensive system? There are many people who are unrepresented litigants in the family court and other courts. So we need to look holistically at things and look at what we can do as a society to try and deal with some of these issues well before it ever becomes a criminal case or ever gets to court. So that's why we have to pay attention to the platforms. And, whether we have good choice or not good choice amongst the parties which are out there, it'd be great if we are more engaged in asking more questions and challenging these people about their policies, so that as we go down the road, we just have a safer and more just society.
And that is today's
Legal
Beat.
Beat.
All right.
Sounds quick.
Okay, and it was brought to you by Neuberger and Partners, one of Canada's leading criminal defense law firms, expertly defending clients since 1992, and you can visit them online at nrlawyers.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Click the channel subscribe button for full-length interviews and more from What She Said here on YouTube.